reading from the letter of Paul to the Philippians. Brothers and sisters, Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me, life is Christ, and death is gain. If I go on living in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. And I do not know which I shall choose. I am caught between the two. I long to depart this life and be with Christ, for that is far better. Yet that I remain in the flesh is more necessary for your benefit. Only conduct yourselves in a way worthy of the gospel of Christ. The word of the Lord.
Our second reading for this Sunday is taken from the letter of Paul to the Philippians. We have been reflecting on the mystery of divine generosity. While God is a just God, the source of justice, God shows in the first reading that there is a brand of divine justice which is called divine generosity. God goes beyond the dictates of strict distributive justice. You get what you deserve. While again, that is not negated, God sees our needs. God knows of what stuff or material human beings are made. And so God can be generous in forgiving, generous in mercy, while God exercises justice. What happens to a person who is influenced by divine generosity? What happens to a person? What change do we find in a person when divine generosity enters one's experience? Let us turn to St. Paul in the second reading. St. Paul is a living example of someone who has benefited from the generosity of God's mercy and compassion. We know his background. He was a Pharisee, a zealous one who protected the purity of the law and the prophets according to their interpretation. And this zeal for the law prompted Saul at the time to participate in the harsh treatment of the early Christians. He was an enemy of Christ and the whole community that pledged allegiance to Christ. Then came that conversion experience. If God operated only on strict distributive justice, what did Saul deserve? He deserved to be condemned. He deserved to be punished. But God, the just God, was also generous. God even called Saul and gave him a new name because he receives from God a new mission. The person who used to persecute Christians is now an apostle, a preacher of Jesus and his good news. Experiencing the generosity of God, which gave him a new lease on life and a new mission in life, St. Paul now can tell the Philippians, look, I am torn. I want to die so that I could meet Christ. Look at that. The generosity of a person, St. Paul, who used to be an adversary of Christ. Now, he is so generous, he wants to die for Christ in order to be united with him. Yet, I said he was torn because he is still being called to serve the mission, to serve the Philippians, and to serve other people through his preaching. And so he says, if I could be of help through the mission, I'm also willing to live. To live. So St. Paul is so generous. His only desire is to live for Christ, to serve Christ. If he could serve Christ more by dying, he would gladly die. But if he could serve Christ more by living, by serving the mission and the gospel, he would also gladly do it. A person who has been changed by the generosity of God now becomes fully generous. Life offered to Christ, whether that means death or mission, everything will be for Christ and the church. We learn from St. Paul. How can you be generous? Look at how God has been generous to us. And you will be, extra generous. You will go beyond the demands of justice. You will not count your time, your remuneration. You will just give all. You will live for Christ.